All right, we're live. I only do live videos because I don't like editing videos or uploading videos or any other kind. So also, I just came in from the backyard digging a lot of dirt. Don't feel bad about that. Looking a little dusty. It's fine. It's good, clean work. Probably cleaner work than I used to do. So I'll take it. A little different format today than some of my other rants, which is what they literally were. This is based on a feeling I've had for really a couple of years that I don't think we need to talk about the particulars of global heating anymore. That has been going on for about 150 years. The science has been studied, quantified, published in a very, very solid and continuous fashion for about 70 years. And I think we get it at this point. I think we get it. I was just telling my wife today, trying to explain why some video we were watching, and we watched lots of stuff about climate change. We both have in the past, and still do, subscribe to a lot of channels. Just Have a Think, Paul Beckwith, Our Changing Climate. It's a long list. And if you've gone down this rabbit hole and you're paying attention to this stuff, then you've probably subscribed to or run across those channels before. And they're all kind of doing the same thing. It's some combination of reading the literature, and, showing the charts and things like that, which is beneficial because not everybody has access to the literature, and the literature on global heating, climate change, whatever you want to call it, almost never makes its way into the mainstream. And if it does, it's generally, a 2-minute segment that just barely glosses over the actual content of paper. So it's fine that we're doing that. It's fine that we're doing that. It's fine that people want to read papers. It's fine that people want to talk about the numbers. They want to show the charts. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm beyond that. I and others, increasingly more, are now beyond that. A little bit about me. So I'm a biologist. I did field biology for a time. I got into software engineering and then became basically a software engineer. But I took engineering courses of other kinds when I was in college, and I have a large background, substantial background with electrical engineering, plumbing, computer engineering, all kinds of stuff. I have a lot of experience on both ends of analyzing data. I can read charts. I can read tables. I understand what people are saying graphically, visually. I don't have any barriers there at all. I understand climate science. I've been studying and following this for a good solid 10 years. In 1990, I was working on my master's degree in biology, and my college professor brought in what we now know as the Keeling curve into class, put it on the transparency, right, and put it on the overhead projector, and we all looked at it. He says, "What do you guys think of this?" And we didn't know what we were looking at. We're not atmospheric physicists, right? We don't understand the Earth dynamic system. We're biologists. We understand the carbon cycle, but for us, it's a cycle, and that's a big deal for biologists. Our perspective on carbon in the atmosphere is very, very different than just about everyone else is looking at this. So that's my background, a little bit about me. I don't generally talk about me much on this channel, but I'll go ahead and share that because today I'm doing a reaction video. Rather than just ranting about what's wrong with the world, which is what you do when you get my age and you're disconnected from a lot of what's going on in the world, and to the extent that you're not making a difference anymore. I'm not running for office. I'm not publishing papers. I'm not an author. I'm not taking classes. I'm not teaching classes. I've done all those things in the past. I'm not doing them now. So ranting is about my only outlet, but it's fine. To get on here once in a while and rant about people doing or saying stupid things is I've earned that. Okay, I've earned that. But that's not what I'm doing today. Today I'm doing a reaction video. And the video I'm reacting to is not even the video that I have in the description or that I'm looking at right here on my monitor. I'm really reacting to 3 or 4 years of these types of videos that are analyzing the papers, reading the papers, showing the graphs, talking about the talking points, reviewing the IPCC reports, talking about the findings, covering the cops, covering what they do at the cops, covering legislation. Okay, all that's fine. What I want to react to is the meta. And the meta issue here is we're talking about numbers. We should not be talking about numbers anymore. The numbers are done. Allow me to illustrate. Now I'm going to do this with numbers, but I'm doing this with numbers to demonstrate why numbers no longer matter, okay? I can get to a point where I can talk about some numbers and compare a bunch of other numbers. And at the end, I can say, you see, it doesn't matter. I need to use numbers to convince you that it doesn't matter, because it doesn't. I've been there, I've done that, I did the math, I've looked at it, I've studied it, and I've looked at the history of humans on Earth, and I've looked at the way people behave. My wife just came home. She'll probably come in here in a minute. And now I'm beyond the numbers, okay? And hopefully I can convince you that there is something to talk about beyond the numbers. So let us proceed. So the title of the video is How Many Will Die from Global Heating? He admits right away that it's a bit of a clickbaity title, and that's fine. We know we do that. The TLDR version is that for every ton of carbon emitted by people alive, for every 1,000 tons of carbon emitted by people, put it on the side. Yeah, I'm making a video shortly. I'm making a video. You can't hear me. Okay, so essentially it is that the carbon we all emit will cause deaths in the future. And you can argue about how much carbon that is per how many deaths and how many degrees C and all this kind of stuff. There's all these important numbers that people think are important. That is not really the issue, nor is that the question. How many tons of carbon you can emit for every person you're willing to kill. We already have jumped. If you were to ask somebody, would you stop driving and flying and vacationing at Disneyland to save a human life? Most people would say no. Or even if they said yes, you could ask the question differently. For all the vehicle miles driven in the US, 50,000 people die in vehicle accidents. Do we need to save those people? And the answer would be no. Okay. And you could tell them, 1,000 tons of carbon will mean one less human in the future. They'll die. That person will die. Do you care? Well, that's me. My 1,000 tons of carbon is how I survive. So no, I guess I don't, because that's in the future. That's not really the question. Here's the problem. We are going to have to stop burning fossil fuels. One of the problems I have with a lot of the issues that people bring up in these YouTube videos or whatever is they never say the thing. And it is the thing, which is leave it in the ground. Leave it in the ground. Leave coal in the ground. Leave oil in the ground. Leave natural gas in the ground. They have to stay in the ground, or we're going to change this planet right out from under us. We may have already done that, by the way. There are plenty of people saying it's too late. Okay, and that could even be a thing. That could be true. But at some point, we are definitely going to do that. Now, you can argue, are we going to do it at 1.5 degrees C or maybe 2 degrees C? James Hansen, back in the day, 1988, said it was 1 degree C. Well, we just keep moving the goalposts. So when someone comes along and says that it's 2.5 degrees C, or it's another gigaton of carbon dioxide released into the atmosphere, these are just numbers, and people can just say another number next year, right? So as long as you're just saying numbers year over year, then you've got this problem that they can change the number. They can use a different number. So at some point, and I believe that the point in time is now. Someone is going to realize that this has to stop. It doesn't even matter what we should have done in the past. Now it must stop. Now it must stop. And who's going to say that? Well, it's not Joe Sixpack who has to commute 40 miles a day to work. He's not going to say that. It's not going to be the retailer who has 3 18-wheelers pulling into the back of their warehouse to disgorge all the consumer goods they're going to sell the next day or the next week. They're not going to say we have to stop this. It's not going to be the airline industries flying all these people back and forth from one continent to the other and then back again like it was nothing, you know. And they're not going to say we have to stop this. No one's going to come out and say that we have to stop this, except the people who can actually stop this. They don't need this except to get rich. Oh, and they already have all the money. So there's a group of people out there, and this is not conspiratorial thinking. This is just how people are. There's a group of people out there who could stop this, who don't stop this because they're making money, but they're going to have to weigh. And and if they're not doing this already, they will be very soon. They're going to have to weigh. I could make more money. That sounds pretty good. Okay. Or is it more important to have a livable planet for me and my spawn that come after me? I'm going to have all this money, but I'm not going to be able to spend it because the planet is unlivable. On the other hand, I could make more money, but for what future if there isn't one, right? So they're weighing this right now. And at some point, those people are going to say, all right, I've got enough money. That side of the scale is heavy. And now I'm worried about a secondary thing, which is my own survival. And those people can turn it off. They can turn it off. I believe they will. I don't believe there's any way. I don't see any way they don't turn it off. At some point, they're going to have all the money in the world, and there's going to be 8 billion people who they just don't need anymore. They just don't need them. And they're going to say, I don't need any more economic growth. We can start up the economic growth engine, in 50 years or 100 years. Right now, we have to solve this immediate problem. Right now, we have to fight World War II. Or we have to fight the Cold War. And after that, we'll go back to making money, okay? That was the logic before. Now it's the logic now. They're going to say, we don't have to make money this year or even next year or even this decade. Let's just put a kibosh on all this and put an end to it and get us back onto firm scientific sound ground. And then we can go back to making money in whatever part of a global economy is left, right? We know this is going to work. We know we can do this. And if it isn't quite correct at that time, we can build something that'll work for us, okay? So they're not worried about making money. They're not worried about having all the money in the world. They're not worried about being the most influential and important people in the world. They've got that now. What they want to do is keep it. They want to keep that. So they can turn this off. They can turn this off. I don't know how. I don't have to answer that. They may not even know how, but there's lots of ways they could do it, right? They could foment wars and destruction in of all these oil-producing countries. It wouldn't be even hard to do. You could start a war between Iran and Saudi Arabia. You could arm both sides. You could make sure that their people are radicalized against each other, and there's all this jihad and all this other stuff, and kill the infidels, and they could have a massive war. You could even give them both nuclear weapons somehow, right? You give them a few nukes for you and a few nukes for you. Not enough to really cause any trouble in the world, but here's a couple of nukes and here's a couple of nukes, and go at it, have fun. And you could do that. You could totally figure that out if you wanted to. Sounds crazy, it sounds conspiratorial, but I'm just looking at the mechanisms by which they could stop this. I could stop this. And as I've said in other videos, actually, a child of 5 could stop this. A child of 5 with a little step stool, okay? Because a child of 5 is really small. A child of 5 with a step stool could stop this whole thing. Because all you have to do is turn off the switches, clunk, and you're not pumping any oil anymore. Clunk, you're not fracking the natural gas, clunk, and the electrical trolleys that pull the coal out of the ground, they just stop working because it's all electrical. It's all electrical, and you turn it off, the switch, clunk. Maybe if you're a little child of 5, you're not real heavy, you have to bounce on it a little bit. Clunk. Okay, so now it works. Child of 5 could turn this off because it's as simple as turning it off. It's a switch. You turn it off. So setting aside the political problems and the economic problems and all those things, the richest people in the world could turn this off. Now, that's your problem. That is your problem. Not how many parts per million, not how many degrees C, not how many watts per square meter of forcing. That is not those are not your problems. Now, maybe those are your problems 70 years ago. 70 years ago, that was worth discussing, but that's not your problem now. Your problem is it's got to stop. That's your actual problem. So my reaction to this video, how many will die from global heating? The answer is nobody, essentially. And maybe at the fringes, a few people will die from global heating. But before, very many people die from global heating, from 2 degrees C or 3 degrees C or 3.4 degrees C or whatever you want to focus on and obsess about. Before that, the elites are going to have to turn this off to save themselves, to save this planet for their personal enjoyment. They're going to have to turn it off, and they can't do that, and they will do that. And at that point, maybe we don't cross 3 degrees C above baseline. Maybe we never cross 2. It doesn't matter. They turned it off for their personal reasons. They could, they should, and they did. That's how it works. That's how it actually works. It doesn't work another way. They could, they ought to. It's the smart move. Then they will. And in the future, we'll look back and say, and they did. Okay, that's how this actually works. It doesn't work another way. Now, let me throw some numbers at you, and you'll see why that is your problem. That is your problem. We are currently 8,000 million people. That is numerically equivalent to 8 billion, but I'm using millions for a reason. You'll see why in a moment. We are 8,000 million people. Now, not too long ago, about the year 1700, maybe 1600, the population of the Earth had been for a long time bouncing around the same number, and up to that point, it was about 250 to 300 million people on Earth. And black plague came and killed a bunch of people, and wars killed a bunch of people, and the younger dryas killed a bunch of people, and migrating out of Africa killed a bunch of people. And so all told, we've been around 250 million to 300 million humans, living humans on Earth, give or take, for the entire civilizational recorded history of humans on Earth, up to that point, about year 1600 or 1700, 1600. At that point, it began to go up. Now, the number of people, the increase in the number of humans was for the reasons you would expect. Improvements in sanitation, improvements in food quality and availability, even improvements in medicine. People started treating illnesses rather than simply throwing a person in a ditch. They began treating broken bones and infections instead of throwing a person in a ditch. So there was lots of reasons why people would live longer. They would have more children. The children would live longer. There was a better quality of life. And so the population of the Earth began to increase. Now, I don't know if this is a fact, but I think in the Kennedy administration, maybe it was a little bit before that, the human population hit 2 billion. 2 billion people. Now, that's a sizable increase relative to, say, 250 million people. We reached 2,000 million people from 250 million people. 2,000. That's an 8-fold increase. That's a lot. It's really unusual that a population of any kind, okay, rabbits, foxes, leopards, we'll see an 8-fold increase in population without deleterious impacts, meaning they then subsequently eat all their food or run out of breeding habitat or contract a terrible virulent disease or attract a predator that wasn't really interested in them at smaller numbers, but now that they're larger numbers, the predators notice and predators all swoop in. Okay, it's really unusual for a population of any kind of animal or even plant for that matter to undergo an 8-fold increase in population and not really essentially suffer from it? Well, we did not. We did not. And then we went on to become, 4 billion and 6 billion, and more recently, 8 billion, 8,000 million. So we went from 250 million to 8,000 million. That's a huge increase. That is, in biological terms, that's virtually impossible. Essentially impossible. Population dynamics just doesn't allow for that. Something bad happens. And, Malthus, back in the day, he was the one who pointed out Malthusian, population dynamics that, as a population increases, its food supply does not increase as quickly or as much even. And so eventually that population crashes and then the food supply can catch up with the numbers. And that was perfectly sound thinking. That was pretty logical. Well, it didn't happen to us. And there's lots of techno-utopians and techno-triumphalists who say Malthus was wrong. Malthus was just completely wrong. He was doing drugs or something because look, now we're at 8,000 million. And wow, that's amazing. Well, okay, look. We are 8,000 million because we essentially destroyed the planet. Now, I'm not saying that as some bead-wearing hippie, although I've got my little amulet here. I probably am a bead-wearing hippie, if you really want to come down to it. But that's not why I'm saying that, okay? Malthus was right. You can outrun your food supply. We just came up with increasingly clever ways, and credit given where credit is due. Okay, it was creative. It was brilliant. The germ theory of disease saved billions of people from dying. Literally, billions of people have dying from trivial infections and diseases. Small improvements in hygiene, like closed sewer systems, results in billions of people surviving exposure to wastewater. And since we're treating our sewer, it's not running into the rivers and lakes. Who knows how many hundreds of millions of people were saved by having the sewer go to a sewer treatment plant. There's no question that we have done extremely innovative things, and we should be proud of what we've accomplished to improve human life. Because, really, if we're going to be this technological society and, stone tools and the whole thing after that, then maybe that's what we should be doing, is improving the quality of human life. And if that means increasing longevity or increasing happiness, then we should do that. There's really nothing wrong with that. Except that Malthus was right. And ultimately, we can't continue this forever. We live on a finite planet, except for innovation. We live in a planet that has a certain surface area, except for innovation. We live in a planet with so much fresh water, so much arable land, so much wild habitat, except for innovation. People keep trotting out this except for innovation thing. Well, let me make sure I stated my point here. The last time that humans lived without fossil fuels was about the year 1600. And I'm kind of, really, it was more like 1750 or 1800, but we were already clearing entire tracts of forest for the wood. Okay, now that's not a fossil fuel. It kind of is a fossil fuel because forests are very old and they contain a lot of carbon in the wood. And it's not a fossil. It wasn't fossilized into mineral form, but it was laid down in wood for thousands of years. It takes thousands of years to create an old growth forest, an extensive, broad, deep, rich forest. And for us to go from 250 million to 400 million, 500 million, we were clearing forests. Now, that is not fossil fuels, but that was a natural legacy created for other reasons that we took advantage of, okay? So we were burning these fossil fuels, these legacy fuels, if you like, this stored carbon, even in the Middle Ages. And by the time England was sending settlers over to the Americas to exploit the resources there, a big part of what they were bringing back was timber, okay, logs and sawn lumber. And the reason why was because Britannia had chewed through all their forests building wooden ships for the war effort. All the empires they were building and all the empires they were fighting and all this, it stripped their country. And same thing in Europe. Making all those trebuchets, right? That's wood. It takes a lot of wood. Taking wood to make charcoal, to smelt iron, and to work iron in forges. That charcoal comes from the forest. So charcoal was later replaced by coal, but that's just a distinction. That's just a difference of mechanism. It's the same intent. So by the year 1600, when we were like 250 million, we had been living on the sun's energy input into our biological system, our habitat, for 10,000. Well, okay. How long have humans been on the planet? Okay, let's say 200,000 years. So we had, up to that point, for 200,000 years, humans had been reliant on the sun for everything. We didn't, when we were burning wood, that came from trees, which got their energy from the sun. When we were killing and eating animals, they were eating the grass or each other, and we killed them, we ate them, but they got their energy from the sun. So we lived on solar power without the panels and the windmills. We were living on solar panel power exclusively, almost entirely. I can't even think of we weren't using water wheels. We weren't doing much for 200,000 years, right? We were living on the sun's annual radiant input that entire time, and we got to 250 million people, and that was about it. Kind of a flat line, a little bit of up and down, and it's hard to know for sure. Surveys, we weren't doing census surveys back then, but there, archaeologists and sociologists can look at the data, look at all the data, and where people were, and how big the cities were, and how much trade was going on. And they can kind of calculate, estimate. There was about 250 million people off and on. So we have gone to 8,000 million people almost entirely due to our exploitation of fossil fuels. Now, my thesis is that is at an end. That is at an end. If you read between the lines of all the IPCC reports and all the interim reports and all the papers written and all the beard pulling about whether it's 2 degrees C or 3 degrees C that's our target. If you read between the lines, the message is we have to stop burning fossil fuels. Now, the fossil fuel industry doesn't want to hear that. What they say is we must mitigate, we must adapt, and then we'll keep burning fossil fuels while we mitigate and adapt. And a lot of techno-triumphalists will say, but innovation. Okay, fine. All these people have their own game they're playing. Long and the short of it is, none of that's going to matter. We have to stop burning fossil fuels. You don't like it? I'm sorry. You think we're going to innovate? We're not. I'm really sorry to tell you that. You think we've got all the time in the world to figure this out? We don't. I'm sorry. That's just incorrect. We're done. And even if we could innovate and remove CO2 in some degree, or marine cloud brightening, or sulfate emissions, or whatever, these are all just Band-Aids, sticking plaster put on a festering wound. We have to stop. We have to stop. Now, the last time we did not live without fossil fuels and without copious access to forests to cut down and burn however we wanted to, we were about, let's say, 200 million people. I'm using a multiple of 2 for all of this. We are 8,000 million people. Let me do some quick math for you. 10% of the current population is 800 million. 1% of the current population is 80 million, okay? So somewhere between 800 million and 80 million is where we used to be. And sort of not even 800 million, more like 250 million, but somewhere in there, okay? So somewhere between 10% and 1% of the current population, somewhere in that range, okay? You could pick 5% if you like. Now, if we decide to live without fossil fuels, which I suggest is inevitable, that's my thesis. It's inevitable. if we're going to choose to live without fossil fuels, then to live solely on the input from the sun, assuming that the natural habitat is there to support us, and assuming that we haven't disrupted the biosphere so much that the planet cannot collect solar input anymore, which maybe it cannot already, then we can support 250 million people, not 800 million, not 10% of the current population, something much, much less than that. Riffing on that point, we have destroyed the planet. There is virtually no natural habitat for humans left. Virtually all humans, except maybe some uncontacted tribes in Brazil and the Lapps in Finland, and some other, virtually all humans on Earth live in, to some degree or another, artificial habitat. Some of them are just barely surviving in artificial habitat, even with all the current fossil fuel consumption and CO2 emissions. Okay, yes, I know we're not distributing the wealth equally, and that's why their lives are so marginal. But they are probably the good news. The people that are living very, very shallow into fossil fuel consumption may have the best narrative going forward. Their dependency is potentially a lot less than everybody else. And they can be large numbers of people, but the point is they are to some degree embedded in this artificial habitat. And its artificial habitat is made out of brick buildings, water deliveries, taking away the sewer, electricity deliveries, internet deliveries, food being trucked hundreds, if not thousands of miles to a local market where you can just buy it with a coin that someone gave you for working for them over here, right? So you're over here working in some stupid factory, having your fingers cut off, and you get that coin and you rush to the market to buy the things you need. That's an artificial situation. That is not a natural situation. That is not going to endure except with massive inputs of fossil fuels. And that thing is going to end. That is going to end. And it's not a question of, well, how many people die at 2 degrees C? How many people die at 3 degrees C? I know this is morbid, but we should look at this. We should talk about this because this is our future. How many people will die at 3 degrees C? How many people will die in total on the way from 1.5 degrees C to 4 degrees C? Okay? And you could ask all these questions and run all these models and make your spreadsheets and spreadsheet this stuff out and have a chart and have a table and have a discussion and have an IPCC report. And none of that matters anymore. It just doesn't. I've seen all that. I've seen all those papers. I've seen all that discussion. I've read them. I've watched the videos. I've looked at the charts. I'm up to here with it. I'm deep in this stuff. And I'm telling you, it's done. It's done. I have seen the light. There's no way to finesse this. They're going to have to turn it off. They, meaning the people who can, are going to have to turn it off. And their motivation will be a good one, which is having a livable planet for themselves, which is why anybody does anything for themselves. Oh, well, we could turn a corner and we could have a great spiritual leader, or we might have a great artificial intelligence, someone who comes along and changes us and makes us all love our fellow brother. And so we won't do it for that reason. None of that's going to happen. None of that will happen. The usual thing will happen, which is that the people in control are going to want to keep themselves safe and healthy, and they're going to stop the thing that threatens their survival. And right now, that's fossil fuels. And they're going to stop the fossil fuels, and they don't care that they don't make any more money this year or this decade. They'll just wait until everything is settled in air quotes. You can decide what that means for yourself. They're going to wait until everything is settled, and then they'll fire back up the global economy or the local economy or the economy in my country or the economy for my tribe or the economy for my race or whatever it is. And they don't care if there's 80 million people left. They don't care if there's 8 million people left. Okay? 8 million people is a lot of people. That's a good-sized city, or that's 8 good-sized cities. That's 8 good-sized cities. It's debatable whether in past history there was 8 cities in the world with 1 million people. What, one on each continent? Maybe. Probably more like 16 cities of import with 500,000, right? So if we go back to that, that's pretty much where we started. That's your Indus Valley, that's your Yellow River Valley, that's your Mississippi Valley, all the important waterways, all the important Mesopotamia, and then the more important cities everywhere. Maybe there were 16 of them of 500,000 apiece, and that's how you get your 8 million. So we could die off to 8 million and just be where we started. And look where we started. Look where it got us. It got us here. It got us penicillin, the internet, supersonic flights, trips to the moon, 8 million people living on the sun alone, no fossil fuels, and really not even much technology. Got us where we are today. So if the human species dies off to 8 million people and they have anything they want, including all the fossil fuels they can burn, and they can replant the forests, and they can protect the wildlife, and they can clean up the estuaries, and they can do all the things. They have free, high-speed rail to everywhere, and free medical, free housing, because it's only 8 million people in the world, and they've got all the resources of the world to do whatever they want. Doesn't that sound good? I mean, that's kind of where we started, except now we have all this other stuff, after 10,000 years of kind of screwing up. Now we have all this other stuff. All we have to do to keep what we have, all we have to do to go back to a sustainable number of people on the planet, all we have to do is stop burning fossil fuels. That's it. Problem solved. And it doesn't even matter at that point whether we're at 2 degrees C or 2.4 degrees C or 2.7 degrees C or 3 degrees C or 10 degrees C. It doesn't matter. There's only 8 million of us. 1/10 of 1% of the current population. 1/10 of 1% of the current population. That's a 99.9% die-off in the absence of fossil fuels. That is completely mathematically predictable. You stop the fossil fuels, 99.9% of the people are dependent on completely artificial habitat. And maybe 1/10 of 1% survive without fossil fuels. And of course, those are the very people who decide to turn it off. So they're going to be fine. They know what they're going to do. They know they're going to do this. And so they just do this. So your problem is not how many tons of carbon can I emit morally before I cross over into immoral, unethical behavior. That's not your question. The question is, can you survive without fossil fuels? Can you? Serious question. I'm all done with the numbers. I'm done. I've seen the numbers. All the numbers are heading in the wrong direction. The only time we hear about the numbers changing and becoming different is when they change or become different in the wrong direction. That things are happening sooner, faster. They're worse than expected. We don't have as much time. We can't burn as much fossil fuels as we thought we could and get away with it. Anytime things change, it's not an improvement. It's just to make it worse. And I'm not the only one noticing. At some point, someone's going to turn it off. That's your problem. Not how much fossil fuel can you consume and still keep your soul unblighted as far as future generations are concerned. That's not your question. Your question is, can you survive without fossil fuels? And my answer to you is that everybody who will see this video or who will see any video like this on YouTube, every single person who uses YouTube on a regular basis and watches this kind of content is going to die. Because the elites don't come here. They don't care. They get their information from scientists and advisors and and content specialists, and they know what they're doing. They have high level information. They don't come to YouTube to figure out what the hell is going on. I don't either. I know what the hell is going on. I know what they're going to do. It's clear as day. They're going to survive. That's your problem. What are you going to do? So when these subjects come up, and my wife and I are watching something, and they fail to say the important thing, which is leave fossil fuels in the ground, or prepare to leave fossil fuels in the ground, or prepare to live without fossil fuels. When all of these pundits, content creators, get on YouTube and they say all these things about numbers, they never say the thing. And the thing is, we're going to have to learn to live without fossil fuels. And my summary for that is get to the lifeboats. Get to the lifeboats. If you were on the Titanic and the Titanic had just hit the iceberg, and maybe in the beginning there's some interest about, well, how much water is coming in? And is there a number? I'll write that down. How big is the crack? I'll write that down too. And I'll do a calculation. How many gallons is that per second? Okay, and how big is the Titanic, and how much water can it store before it sinks? Oh, okay, I'll calculate that. You do all these calculations, and at some point you get to a number, or you get to a realization. You get to a realization, and your response is not yet another number. Your response is, oh, yeah, we're fucked. Okay, and someone will come along and update you and say, well, actually, the gallons per minute coming in is slightly different. You're not going to hear it because it's not going to matter. You've already done the math, you've looked at the equations, and you're thinking, oh, yeah, there's no way this works out. It's just not going to work out. And at that point, you stop asking how many gallons per minute are coming in, and you stop asking how many gallons are you pumping out per minute. You just don't care anymore. This ship is going down. Oh, that was the final result. I did all the numbers, but the result, my understanding of the numbers was, oh, yeah, we're pretty much fucked. So then what do you do? Well, some people would go back to the dining room and order a tiramisu, okay, or coffee or whatever, and they'll sit down and enjoy themselves. Some people will just say, well, the ship is sinking, so I guess I'll just have another dessert. Other people will start asking different types of questions, not like how many gallons per minute are coming in and how quickly is the ship sinking. They're going to start asking a more pertinent question. They're going to get beyond the numbers. They're going to get beyond the discussion and the debate. And is it sinkable? It says right here on the ticket, it's unsinkable. No one's going to care. They're going to have one thing on their mind. They're going to have one question. Where are the lifeboats? Do we have lifeboats? Where are they? Does anyone know how to? They're not in the water. Okay, I see that. Does anyone know how to lower them? Am I qualified? Will you let me do that? Can I have a lifeboat, please? Where are the Is there any food on the lifeboats? Is there water on the lifeboats? How many people can a lifeboat hold? What happens when we float away from the ship? Does anyone come and save us? What should we do? Do we need candles, lights, flashlights, signal flares? I mean, how do we get people's attention to come and rescue us in our lifeboat? That's the nature of the thinking at some point. You've got the numbers, the gallons per minute, the rate of filling, the rate of sinking, how many gallons are being pumped out. Yeah, I've done them all. And you say, we're fucked. And then you're just not interested in that anymore. You just go away. It doesn't matter how many tons of carbon dioxide I can emit into the atmosphere before I have a moral problem with how many people I'm going to kill in the future with all the climate change I'm creating. That's not the question. That is no longer the question. 70 years ago, we could have had that discussion. We could have sat people down and said, here's your moral quandary, okay? You're going to burn fossil fuels today, and you're going to kill people in the future. We're not sure how far out that future is, but it could be 100 years or 200 years. Maybe it makes a difference to you how far out it is, but let's just have a basic discussion about the moral implications of you doing something today for your personal gain that's going to murder, essentially. It's murder because you're doing it on purpose, okay? Because I just told you you're doing it, and now you know, and if you continue doing it, then it's manslaughter, it's homicide, and these people are going to die because of what you're doing, okay? So do you want to continue doing that or not? We could have had that discussion 70 years ago. Now, if we'd had it 70 years ago, which we couldn't, and we didn't, and we're really not even having it now, right? we would have been fewer people, less dug in, less dependent, on a planet that is less destroyed than we are today. 70 years ago, that discussion might have made a difference. We probably would not have gotten to 8,000 million. Maybe we would have gotten to 4,000 million. And maybe we still would have had to have had some kind of a die-off as a result. But we would have had a better situation than we have now. Our situation right now is we're fucked. You cannot believe that. That's fine. I don't expect you to believe that. But I'm telling you, you're fucked. Unless you're, one of the 8,000 people who run this civilization, who essentially call the shots on everything that happens in the world. Unless you're one of those 8,000 people, none of which watch YouTube. Okay, none of which go on the internet at all. If you're that 8,000 people who run everything on the planet, and some of them, some of their families anyway, have run the planet, the civilization, the human component of this planet. They have run this place for 1,000 years. They know exactly who they are. Unless you're one of those 8,000 people, then you're just not in the loop. And they are not coming here. They're not watching this video. They're not watching any videos. They also didn't watch how many will die from global heating. They didn't watch that. They don't care. They're just looking at their profit sheets and their political influence, and they're looking at any reports on the status of the planet and what's happening with the systems that they are also dependent upon, and they're just making a decision. And you're not included in that, nor am I. We need to stop focusing on the numbers. Numbers don't matter. The numbers are going to happen. 2 degrees C is going to happen. 3 degrees C above baseline is going to happen. Thousands of tons of carbon emitted is going to happen. People are going to become more and increasingly dependent on fossil fuel consumption. All these things are going to happen. We will not reduce our fossil fuel consumption. We will not reduce our emissions of CO2. We will do none of these things. Everything will head in the wrong direction. Everything will come unglued at the same time. Everything will come unhinged. People will lose their minds. People will lose faith. They will lose hope. They will riot. They will destroy. They will revolt. They will overthrow their governments. They will storm their capitals. They won't trust anyone. They'll be fearful. They'll be angry. And they'll be vengeful. And the 8,000 people who really do run the planet, and the 8 million people who, are going to live in the 16 or 20 cities that emerge from all this, don't care. They're going to shut it off. They have to shut it off. They're not going to let us useless eaters destroy their planet. This is their planet. It's been their planet for thousands of years. And they're not going to let us deprive them of their big blue marble. So my reaction is that these numbers no longer matter. Obsess about them if you want to. It's like the Titanic is sinking and you're worried about how many gallons per second are coming in. Fine, go right ahead. If that gives you comfort, fine. Me, I'm getting to the lifeboats. Now, I don't know what that means on a practical level as regards climate change. I think you absolutely 1,000% have to free yourself from fossil fuel dependency. You can't. You can't do that, nor can I. Now, I'm dusty. I came in here dusty because I'm outside working in the backyard. We have a garden. We've built beds. We have all this dirt. All these things are growing. It's not even a full-time job, and we have a lot of stuff going on. There's things you could do to enhance your survivability. That's not even it. The most important thing you could do in terms of getting to the lifeboat is to make a lifeboat. So I could do a whole video on this. I'm not going to do it right now, but the lifeboats in this scenario, since we're not really on the Titanic, it's not really a ship, really in the North Atlantic, actually sinking, and we just need a little wooden dinghy to get into so we can float off. Because we're a global civilization, lifeboat means something else. Okay, what does it mean? It means hyper-local community. It means, within your Dunbar number limit, 250 or 300 people, recreating village life, growing enough food, having enough specialists, having people who understand medicine and teaching and agronomy and animal husbandry and carpentry and electrical and plumbing and all these other things to form a survivable unit. And one family, one person hunkered down in a bunker with their AR-15, that's not a survivable unit. 250, maybe 350, 400 people working together, circling their wagons, pooling their resources, that is a survivable unit. So that's a lifeboat. Now, if you make your lifeboat in an area that can't support 300 people, pooling their resources, because there's just nothing for you to draw from. There's no arable land. There's no source of water on the surface. There's no wildlife. There's no runoff from the mountains. If you're in a bad place, then it kind of doesn't matter. You made your lifeboat in the wrong place. If you're on the Titanic and you built a lifeboat, but you built it in the engine room, then you kind of screwed up, right? So there's nothing much we can do about that. We're all in our situation. We're rapidly going to find ourselves going under. We're going to have to pool our resources with other people who are also rapidly going under, okay? And by helping each other and supporting each other, we can swim away from this thing. Maybe not, probably not, but it's something you could do. Get to the lifeboat. If you don't have one, build one with your neighbors in your community. Figure out how to do that. Learn how to do that. Can you make a wooden wheel? Can you manage seeds? Do you have heirloom seeds? Because all your hybrid seeds are going to really betray you. Do you have heirloom seeds? Do you have arable soil? Do you have access to water? If it's coming from the city, do you think the city can supply you with water in the future? Or do you need to build a well, right? Do you live in an area, looking at you, Phoenix, Arizona, that you just don't have water naturally without massive influxes of technology? Then you have to ask yourself, well, is my city that's dependent on massive influxes of raw materials like water and electricity, is my city important? Will the elites save my city? Will my city be one of the 17 great cities that survives into the future with 500,000 people and all these little communities, working together, and farming over here and animals over there and light manufacturing here and special services, education, Grange halls, education for the children to teach them how to do things with animals and plants and fibers and all this stuff. If you're not that community, then your future is essentially nothing. You don't have one. You don't have that future. Can we predict now, where are the 16 cities that are going to survive without fossil fuels? Because that's your problem. Your problem is not how many tons of carbon can I burn and not put a black stain on my soul. Okay, that's not your problem. Your problem is, how are you going to survive without fossil fuels? Because they are going away. That is at an end. That must stop, and it will. And the people who can stop it care to stop it. They don't care about you. They don't care about the planet. They don't care about natural habitat. They just want to survive. And when there's 8 million people on the planet, 0.1% of the current population, then they can burn all the fossil fuels they want to, right? They can have all the nuclear reactors they want to. They can drive all the cars they want to. They can have robot farmers on any arable land they can find or make, and they can transport their water as far as they want. And it's easy when you're only 8 million people as opposed to 8,000 million, right? They can do whatever they want. They can keep everything we have today for themselves if they stop fossil fuels for all the rest of us. That is your problem. That is where the people die. And it is potentially a 99.9% die-off. That's what it is. That is substantially below where we were before we started on this path. And yet, that's where we probably have to go. Now, we may build back from that number. We may go back from that and branch out in a very controlled way, right? We don't want to do that again. We'll do something, okay? But we're going to fall very, very far. It will be an uncontrolled descent. We will lose all power in all engines. The wings will fall off. It will be an uncontrolled descent, cratering, from which 0.1% will walk away. Now, they're not going to be on that plane, are they? They're going to be somewhere else because they're the elites, and they kind of saw this happening because they were planning on doing it. That was their idea. So they made sure they were okay. They had their supplies of fossil fuels. They had their technology. They had their allies. They had their private airfield with their private plane. They had contracts set up with security forces. And they circled their wagons, and they made their lifeboat, their own little survivable thing. And then they shut it off. How they shut it off? I don't know. I can think of 1,000 ways to shut it off, including a child of 5 with a step stool. That's your problem. And you don't have to worry about whether civilization collapses at 2 degrees C above baseline, or maybe 3, or maybe we can go as far as 4. I don't know. It could be. I can imagine fantasy land that we can do that. Okay, that's not your challenge. The challenge is that 1% of us, 80 million on a severely damaged planet, 1% of us will actually survive turning off the fossil fuels. 1%. That's still 80 million people. I think we crash right through 80 million. There are no lifeboats on this Titanic. And only the rich are going to build lifeboats for themselves out of whatever materials, resources, and politics they have at hand. They're going to take care of themselves, and then they're going to turn off the fossil fuels. Yeah, 1%. Maybe 0.1%. More likely the latter. So that's my reaction to this video. It's really a reaction to 3 years of watching this obsessive compulsive disorder. What is the number? What is the parts per million? What is the forcing at double CO2? I've been watching this for a long time, and at this point, I'm sick of it. I'm a biologist and an engineer, and I can look at the figures, and I can do the math, and I've already come up with, oh yeah, we're fucked. Time to get the lifeboats. Okay, trying to figure that latter part out. Good luck. But that's your actual challenge. That is your challenge. Can't help you there. I think about it. I'm applying my copious and unique wisdom to the problem. Not really sure what I can do. Kind of watching what everybody else is doing. See when people are willing to start making lifeboats. I can't force them to, and I can't do it by myself, and maybe it never happens. Well, what can I say? I guess we weren't that wise. I guess we weren't that smart. And I don't think everybody's going to die, but I think most of us will.